Hello, my name's David Eyre and I'm a Professor of Infectious Diseases. I'd like to give you one example of how the Infection in Oxfordshire research database has been really helpful. So, what we have with infectious diseases is occasionally we see new infections that we don't completely understand that come along and provide a challenge to deal with. And one of those things has been an infection called Candida auris. So this is a new super fungus that is resistant to most of the treatments used to try and help patients, and it also tends to affect the most unwell patients in intensive care units, for example. And it wasn't really known about until a few years ago. So in 2016, Public Health England identified that it might be a problem in hospitals in the UK, and we had a look back at all the cases we'd had in our hospital and found that actually we'd had 9 previous cases and 8 of them were all on the same intensive care unit. And so, working as a team of researchers and also with colleagues in the NHS very closely, we tried to understand what could be going on. And colleagues in the NHS started an intensive screening programme both of patients and of the environment in the intensive care unit. And what we were able to do with the Infections in Oxfordshire research database was to piece together information about the patients who had infections and the patients who didn't. What the team doing the sampling did was to look at a number of different things, and initially they sampled many different places and couldn't find where the infection was. And then on one occasion they took a particular type of temperature probe that was used for measuring patients' temperature continuously that normally rested in patients' armpits. And when those were tested, one of these probes grew the Candida auris bug that was causing the problem. When the team then went back and tested all the other temperature probes that were in regular use, they found that nearly all of those had Candida auris on too. So what we could do with the Infections in Oxfordshire research database was to then ask the question, well, if we look at all the cases of Candida auris infection, how many of them used these temperature probes and how many didn't? And what we found was that actually 86% of all the people who got the infection had used the temperature probes, compared to only 34% of people who hadn't. And that gave us really quite strong evidence that the temperature probes might be important. We also used another part of the Infections in Oxfordshire research database, which was linking up this data from the intensive care unit to information that researchers had collected on the DNA sequence or genetic code of the Candida auris fungus causing the infection. And what the team found was that the type of Candida auris found on the probes looked very similar to the type of Candida auris that was found in patients. Now, although this actually ended up being one of the largest outbreaks of this kind in the UK, it was successfully controlled, and having removed the temperature probes from use, the outbreak was ended. And what we learned here, we were able to share with clinicians and researchers, both in the UK and internationally, and it's led to changes in guidelines about how Candida auris is controlled, and particularly thinking about making sure that reusable equipment is cleaned as well as possible between patients. So, and having had those guidelines and having had changes in the way in which we do things, we've not had a problem in Oxfordshire with this fungus, again causing an outbreak, and actually across the whole UK there have not been large outbreaks either.